My work is shadow and light, which I experiment combining with multiple mediums. The results I aim to create have a theatrical element, the harsh tones presenting a dramatic atmosphere for the viewer. The subject matter in my personal work is then of scenes from theatre due to my desire to present a story from images to further engage an audience. Considering an audience for my work, I feel it appeals to all genders due to the broad subject matter. The target audience for my work I would consider to be people who love theatre because of my subject matter. Live projects I have taken part in for this course have been the Sausage Brief, Christmas Card, Bread and the Frankenstein exhibition. From completing work to a deadline, I have gained skills for producing a finished result within a specific time frame and within the desired boundaries of a brief. This also allowed me to look at how adaptable my style of art is when working with subject matter I don't use in my personal work. I found my methods of creating art worked well to produce multiple experiments and work at a fast pace. My personal practice with shadow and light I developed from traditional practices with oil paint and sketching. One of the first artists that inspired my work was Claude Monet and his vibrant oil paintings. His series such as The Cathedral and Haystacks focused on light and time, exhibiting different times of the day with the same scene. The artist stated, "For me, the subject is of secondary importance. I want to convey what is alive between me and the subject." Monet's focus on light influenced me to explore it in my own painting, first looking at tone with colour. From looking at shadow in paint, I then began to develop my work further by looking at it as a medium on its own. I brought my paintings into the light and combined shadows over the top, using my hands or found objects around me. The combination of light and shadow with paint I feel is a way of developing my style further while creating a unique appearance. A period of art that has greatly influenced my work has been Impressionism. The artist focused on the application of the medium with mark making. The results then add up to a bigger picture which appears as only a glimpse of the real scene. I feel this appearance works so well for drawing the viewer into the image, bringing attention to how it was made and the effect the overall appearance gives. With the Impressionists often working plein air, it gave focus to light and time's influence on a scene, their attention to outdoor effects of light, shadow and reflection, and their brilliant broken touches of colour. In my own work, I have found that from sketching live, it forces different results due to the uncontrollable nature of your surroundings. When being outdoors, you have the factors of time, weather, and other people, which then makes each sketch individual. I sketch live in this module at Kirkgate Market, which is a great space for capturing your surroundings. From drawing live from a scene, it brought my focus to starting with the most important element of a subject matter and encouraged quick mark making. Looking at my image, which was in the Frankenstein exhibition, I focused on representing the hands of the characters in shadow. I was drawn to hands as I often experiment with them in natural light, finding the subject matter expressive and ominous. This I feel is because it creates an enigma to how the rest of the characters look and what their intentions are. I focused on the relationship between Frankenstein and his creation, representing one with a large gloved hand while the other human. A piece of work I had in mind as inspiration was the creation of Adam, with one hand reaching for the other either out of desire or curiosity. Considering the image's meaning, I wanted to convey the connection both characters have and how there is a desire to understand each other. Also, I wanted to show the fear between them conveyed with the hands close but not touching each other. The fear from Frankenstein being the monster he has created, and the fear from his monster being rejection from society. The quote, "And should I feel kindness towards my enemies?" further highlights the complications between the two characters. The black and white colour palette also connotes a dark atmosphere, being inspired by film noir. The harsh lines in the image convey a narrative of having to follow something or be led down a path. This then highlights two characters being stuck on different paths and struggling to find an understanding. In film noir, lines are often used to create tension and build suspense, for example when a character is seen peering through blinds. The shadows and strong lighting in my work is shown to hold links to the genre of film noir, the term being translated as black film or film of the night, which I really like, giving connotations of mystery and intrigue. This style emerged at a time surrounding the Great Depression and World War II, which is then reflected in the lack of happy endings in this genre. Referring to the film Wizard of Oz, Kansas is shown in darker tones while the Land of Oz is in colour. The world of fantasy being a place of safety and comfort is then represented in colour as it shows the vibrance of dreams. The more sepia tones are then used to connote reality and a bleak sense of everyday life, which the contrasting tones convey well to the viewer. A lighting technique that I often had in mind when producing my work was chiaroscuro, which is a juxtaposition between light and dark. This effect creates a dramatic atmosphere with contrasting areas shown in a visual piece. An example of this technique in cinema can be seen through the film Nosferatu, which linked to my piece shown in the Frankenstein exhibition. The link surrounding the theatrical hands for my piece is highlighted in the link between the monster and his creator, while in Nosferatu it's shown with the sinister hand of Dracula. What I like of this link is how it highlights you don't need a busy image to convey a scene or narrative. After looking at light and shadow as a medium of its own, I then began to research artists which used it as their practice. Uta Barth works with light in familiar settings and directs the viewer to what they are looking at, not what they're thinking. Her art with light often works to undermine our visual readings of volume and space. Her interest in the mundane really sparked my own interest in light created in natural everyday settings. I looked at artificial light as well as making images with this light and using clear objects and my phone's torch. The result this light gave I wasn't as fond of compared to the natural light because of the sharp contrast it created, which reduced the range of tone in the image. My focus on the importance of tone was down to the atmosphere it could create. I was keen on showing drama but not horror, which the harsh tones created. I photographed natural light in different settings after influence from Barth and found that once your attention is drawn to it, you realise how many patterns of light we don't truly register. The natural light patterns that I have seen then inspire layouts in my more controlled experiments and gave me images to later combine with. For this image, I really liked the colour in it, providing a warm atmosphere and giving the audience the impression of the rest of the scene. The window creates the illusion of a building, giving connotations of safety and the ability to see out onto something else. Shown with light and shadow, I feel the window then highlights the otherworldly atmosphere of this medium, which is so familiar to the human eye that it can then go unnoticed. I have carried out work in the darkroom experimenting with photograms as another method of exploring shadow and light. The process of working in the darkroom I did enjoy. I found it to encourage experimentation and I could get a production line of work going. To develop my photograms further, I combined images of my light work through editing the opacity to best enhance the images. An aspect I found the darkroom removed from my work was a sense of movement because of the strong shapes that were developed. However, this had the potential to be worked around through animation. My submission for the bread brief was produced from working in the darkroom. I used sourdough bread to add texture to the image, which then produced greater tone and shape. I broke the bread in two, having in mind Jesus and how the bread was shared amongst his disciples, showing bread's reference in history. The two halves can be seen to connote sharing but also destruction. Something being broken is then unable to return to its original form. It shows the image in a darker light. The darker atmosphere to the image then links to the dramatic appearance created with the photogram's harsh tone. A way I developed this work further was by experimenting with it in risoprint, which I believe added great texture to my image through the noisier quality which the photogram couldn't convey. I also inverted the colour palette through Photoshop for the original bread images, which I felt drew more attention to the detail of the bread, with the holes in the sourdough being more visible. However, the new brightness to the images did reduce the dramatic atmosphere created from the original photograms. Looking at artists which combine two different mediums, as this was an interest in my own work, I was then directed to William Kentridge. His combination of charcoal and light present dramatic scenes filled with narrative. Kentridge's work can also be seen in opera, for example with The Magic Flute, where he brings modern techniques to combine with the traditional setting. His work has been described as a multi-dimensional performance piece that thrills both vocally and visually. This image shows the fantasy atmosphere he works to add to the performance, with intricate harsh lighting. His sets draw attention to the performances as the calming colours enhance the spotlights, which control the viewer's attention. The speckles of light convey the stars, and then astronomy, which builds the scene without any objects on set to do the job. Kentridge's combination of visual work with the music of opera creates an engaging result for the audience. The artist Kara Walker works with dark silhouettes of figures linking to themes of violence, sexuality and race. Her work is very much off the page, working in a large space for exhibition and to incorporate the viewer. After researching her work, a piece that I was most interested in was Darkytown Rebellion, showing multiple different figures spread over a gallery space depicting a dramatic rebellion. Dark silhouettes I've worked with through my own work, and projections I've started to explore as another method of presenting my work in light. An aspect of Walker's work which I admire was the scale at which she works at and how her presentation works in the space for viewing. Having work in an exhibition space encourages greater engagement with an audience as they are stood before it in person. They can view it up close and at the intended size. This I found to be true when viewing the work at the Frankenstein exhibition. Another opportunity where my work was in an exhibition space was for the Overbury competition. The brief was warm industrial, for which I created an image in natural light of brickwork. The meaning of the piece reflecting Leeds' industrial progress and history. Completing this piece for the client encouraged me to think of my target audience, looking at their core values and researching the space aimed for the work. Having the work in a gallery space also allowed me to see how my image worked with those of others and for it to be viewed in person by the corporate client. From this brief, I gained skills of tailoring my work to an audience while creating interest from my own style of art. David Hockney has created an array of work spanning from photography, paint and set design. His style embraces abstraction and vibrant colour. I discovered Hockney's liking of opera after reading of his interest in stage. Hockney loves opera. He takes every opportunity of seeing familiar and unfamiliar ones in London and while travelling. His love for opera then brings reference to the importance of light when creating these set designs. In this image, the shadow sits mainly over the house, creating a sense of danger and unknown. The light highlights the characters, showing the importance in the scene, and it is faded over the roofs, creating a sense of anticipation. To produce the best results, he said to think about the colour of your set and light on the colour right at the beginning. In my own work with light, I make sure to experiment as I carry out the process to get the finished result. For example, when using paint on acetate, it is only when the inclusion of light that the true appearance is revealed, so continuous checks must be done to control the result. Hockney's set work then inspired me to look at creating scenes with light of a theatrical nature. For the sausage brief, I created images of a sausage being tossed in a pan, which then brought narrative to the movement in my animation. I developed my images further by editing them into black and white, which enhanced the harsh contrast, creating a sense of drama. From completing the brief, I was able to experiment with producing an animation with my style of working. For editing my images into animation, I use a stop motion app which allowed me to control the speed and number of images used. I also duplicated the images, creating a short loop which better conveyed the action in the scene. Overall, I was pleased with how adaptable I found my shadow and light work to be, working with a subject matter I wouldn't think of representing. It was quick to work with and was then good for manipulating to provide different atmospheres. Thinking of professional work, these are qualities essential when working to a deadline and when editing results to meet a client's requirements. The inclusion and practicality of shadows is shown to be used from the history of Chinese shadow puppetry. The shadows told stories through theatrical scene depicting narrative and history surrounding themes of family and politics. The material used was mainly derived from animal skin, which was then moulded to new shapes. Shadow puppets also held a great entertainment value as they encouraged engagement with an audience of large numbers, increasing atmosphere in the space. In my own work, I've used shadows to tell a story, finding the shapes to create drama and suspense. Scenographer Josef Svoboda produced multiple productions which were shown in theatre and opera. His work was a combination of lighting effects and live actors, with some of his work being pre-filmed to then develop further on the night. A quote I really like from Svoboda is, "Without an unending search for the key to the secret of creativity, there is no creation." He said this when discussing the role of fear in his work, thinking of how that pressure for the next thing caused change. In my own work in this module, I've changed from looking at fantasy and books to the narrative of Les Miserables, which then led me to theatre. The points where I felt stuck in my work, that time allowed reflection, allowing me to move on to a more developed outcome. For example, with the subject of theatre and its link to my dramatic lighting. The light in this image of Svoboda's work appears as an explosion, conveying a pause in time while showing great change. The harsh tone then includes the figures into the scene, changing them into shadow. To me, the marks of lighting appear scratchy, like they are marks forcefully left behind, which could connote the artist's intentions for how he wants the audience to remember his work. The work of Paul Nash shows scenes of war in paint through a surrealist style. Even though his work depicted the destruction of war, Nash's landscapes show a romantic nature, with the rolling country hills or curved tree branches. His view on nature is shown in the letter Home, where he was describing the scene on no man's land. Maybe you can feel some things of the weird beauty from this little letter. This piece of work, named We Are Making a New World, shows shattered trees illuminated by rays of sunlight. Nash's attitude to war, I feel, is shown from this title, which without the image sounds like propaganda, but when you see the image with the land damaged, it quickly shows its irony. The light in this image plays an important role in changing the atmosphere. When you first look at the scene, the broken trees convey a sense of misery and loss. However, with the light rolling over the green land, connotations of hope bring the promise of new life. The shadows in the image show the holes left behind from the bombing, the light from the sun showing the effects of war on the land. Lighting in my own work I use to create dramatic atmospheres. To control the atmosphere of my images further, I then edit the colour palette from browns to show history in my images, and to black and white to then add drama to my subject matter. I painted onto acetate with the aim of creating my own shadows. The acetate worked well for projecting my work and showing the paint's unique mark making. I was able to create scenes of a theatrical nature with the overhead projector, and then build up the images with three-dimensional layering. To develop the element of theatre further in my work, I created a cardboard set which I was then able to edit my acetate shadows into on Photoshop. The aspect of theatre tied well with my work, as my dramatic lighting was given a narrative to depict. After watching shows at the theatre such as Hamilton and Oliver Twist at Leeds Playhouse, while carrying out this work, it showed me professional avenues where my work would be well suited. I also saw Les Miserables in London, which then inspired me to use it as my subject matter in this module, working my lighting to dramatic theatrical scenes. A job role such as lighting designer would be a great path for my style of work, which has led me to email theatre companies inquiring on work experience. Reaching out professionally has allowed me to develop my skills of communication through email, as well as connect with people in the industry. Moholy Nagy's abstract photography influenced my experimentation with photograms and work with light. He used domestic objects in his work with the aim of showing reality. The tone captured in the photographs presents an otherworldly atmosphere, which is best shown in the quote, "That uncanny experience can create a sense of what we are seeing somehow transcends the natural." This photogram, Moholy Nagy's, I feel challenges the natural. The hand behind the lines has connotations of imprisonment, yet some of the lines are faded into the hand, creating this feeling of breaking free, then challenging the reality. The use of hands I also included in my own work when I experimented with the overhead projector. The subject matter of a hand to me has connotations of control, but when presented flat and relaxed, I feel it gives an atmosphere of calm and openness. My hand was also holding a paintbrush to highlight art and the making of a piece. I feel this image worked well because of the strange shifting light, which shows an otherworldly energy. The artist Man Ray also links to my work of photograms as well as experimentation with light. His work with multiple mediums is shown from the reflection, "There is no competition involved. Painting and photography are two media engaging in different paths. There is no conflict between the two." His experimentation led him from one path to the next, and when looking at my own work, I have done similar while combining all these different paths. For example, my combination of paint with light and photography. Man Ray's rayographs show movement in a still image with its black and white tones. His intention with mood to the image can be seen in this quote, "You can transform a photograph into a mirror that will capture and retain your dreams and desires." In this image, there is a sense of the objects falling through space. The varying tones add movement to the still image. The object of a spring has connotations of being wound up and tight, however, when shown through the style of a photogram, this is completely altered. Looking at light in motion and its representation for uses in the media, I watched the short film Leading Light by John Smith. When viewing the footage, I found the perspective was also manipulated through the lens of the camera, as it showed the audience specific sections of the room. The video follows the light, but also seems to seek it out, which is shown from the window shot framing the light source. Through the movement of light, the viewer is shown the passing of time, which adds visual narrative to the footage. After researching the film, I realised that the purpose of the film was to allow the camera's lens to reveal the irregular beauty of a familiar space. This is portrayed in the film through the shots and slow timing for which the subject matter is exposed to the viewer. With the short use of sound in the footage, I also feel that the video holds the viewer's attention as they wait for what may come next. This anticipation, I believe, allows the viewer to slow down and be present. Developing my own work further, I experimented with animation, which I projected onto a white walled space. I combined images of my shadows with the stop motion app, using my acetate paintings which had been created from natural light and the overhead projector. This process then allowed the blend of old technology with the new, combining the results of two different projectors. The results created harsh lighting, which I feel was softened through the movement of being in animation. The aspect I felt that was missing from this process was texture and depth, which is why I included the voil over the light source. The material added another layer of movement and created a more engaging scene for the viewer. I also had the voil as curtains to create the impression of a production-like appearance, reflecting my aspirations of my style to work in a professional setting such as film or theatre. Artist Inu Badich produced a line of clothing inspired by shadows. The pieces were created from the outline of a person's shadow, before then seeing how the shape would hold when modelled. What I found interesting from Inu's work was how he mentioned, shadow wear is a critique to the notion of perfection. This highlighting how in a shadow it can show a completely different image of a person. From shadows we see a reflection of ourselves, yet there is a familiarity between them all. Shadows are consistent in how they follow the human figure and how they are manipulated by light. From a shadow, any other complications of a human figure are stripped away, leaving the shape and emotion that portrays. It is interesting to see the influence of shadows in the area of fashion, after my main focus being in its raw form. The results of the clothing are unique and intriguing, which shows how the influence of shadows can lead down a meaningful path. Thinking of my work professionally, I could then branch my own work from lighting design to incorporate the use of costume design. This could be achievable in stage production, which is why I've been applying for work experience and developed my work through all external opportunities that have been presented throughout this module. Carrying out my research has shown to me the importance of light in art, how it controls and creates a scene. I intend to continue this work in my further studies while aiming to extend it into professional job roles.